Rome, the greatest city ever created by man. Its power was boundless and its influence ubiquitous. Armed legions marched along roads laid across deserts and mountains, carrying with them law and order. Great temples and palaces rose as symbols of unshakable strength, and its citizens believed that Rome would be eternal. But in the shadows of this grandeur, a threat was growing. Where once discipline reigned, now passions and intrigues flared. Corruption seeped into the hearts of its rulers, and greed turned their gaze inward. The Senate, once a bastion of wisdom, had become an arena for power-hungry individuals. And on the empire's distant borders, clouds gathered as barbarians who once feared Rome's strength, now prepared to deliver a deadly blow. Rome, once thought invincible, now stood on the edge. Within, decay and weakness; outside, an army of enemies ready to crush it. The time of greatness was coming to an end. The time of darkness was upon it. Chapter 1. Poisoned Rome. Rome, gleaming with grandeur and power, rose above the world as an unparalleled symbol of human genius. Its aqueducts, like giant arteries, carried life through mountains and valleys, nourishing cities and settlements. But within these waters, flowing through magnificent channels, lay an invisible enemy, Lead, a silent killer lurking in every sip, in every luxurious bath of a patrician. Lead permeated every aspect of Roman life. It was in the pipes through which water flowed, in the vessels from which they drank wine, in the cosmetics that adorned the faces of noble women. The metal that Romans considered a symbol of progress turned against them, transforming the water of life into the elixir of death. The waters of the Tiber, which once brought grace and fertility, now carried with them unseen destruction. Every sip, every lead-coated vessel added a drop of poison to Roman blood. This invisible foe knew no distinction between emperors and slaves, senators and soldiers. It slowly eroded mind and body, making people weak and vulnerable. Emperors and patricians, proud of their health and strength, became victims of their own grandeur. The madness and paranoia that gripped the Roman elite were not only the fruit of intrigue, but also a consequence of poisoning. Great generals lost their clarity of thought, their strategic genius clouded by the fog of lead. Legions, once invincible, now marched under the command of leaders with dulled minds, leading their soldiers to inevitable defeat. The irony of fate, the achievements that Rome was so proud of, became its curse. The technology that amazed the world turned against its creators. A city shining with marble and gold was undermined from within by an invisible poison. Citizens enjoying luxury and comfort were unaware that each day brought them closer to the abyss. Lead, a treacherous destroyer against which neither sword nor shield could help. It penetrated the very heart of the empire, destroying it from within. A decline in birth rates, a rise in diseases, the mental degradation of the elite, all became Rome's new reality. The great civilization slowly withered, unaware of the cause of its suffering. Rome's greatness melted like wax under the scorching sun. The city, once thought eternal, was powerless against an invisible enemy. And when finally the enemies came knocking at the gates, Rome was too weak to resist. Lead had done its work. The great empire had been poisoned, and no one noticed until it was too late. Chapter 2. Christianity. In the shadows of Rome's grand temples, where for centuries prayers to Jupiter and Mars had resounded, a new faith began to emerge like a faint spark in boundless darkness. Christianity, a simple yet powerful idea of salvation and equality, arrived from the distant eastern edges of the empire. For many, it became a beacon of hope in a world filled with chaos and injustice. But for Rome's elite and emperors, whose power rested on the worship of ancient gods, this faith was like a storm cloud looming over their world. At first, Christianity spread quietly, like a whisper of wind in the desert. It resonated with slaves and the poor, those for whom the existing order was a chain of despair. They gathered in hidden catacombs where their voices united in prayers echoing underground. Their faith offered not only salvation, but also the promise of equality and justice, things Rome could not provide. Yet power could not tolerate such a dangerous idea, and soon the shadow of persecution fell upon them. Emperors, sensing a threat to their might, launched ruthless persecutions. The cries of martyrs pierced the night silence, their blood staining the sands of the arenas, but their faith was stronger than steel. Christians were taken from their homes, thrown into the Colosseum for the amusement of the crowd. Wild animals tore their bodies, the flames devoured their flesh, but they could not destroy their spirit. Each martyr consumed in the fires of persecution became a seed from which new followers sprang forth. Fire failed to extinguish the flame of faith. It only made it burn brighter. Two worlds clashed, the majestic temples of Jupiter towering over the city against the humble catacombs of Christians hidden in the earth's depths. The old gods and the new God fought an unyielding battle for the souls of people. While Roman nobility indulged in lavish celebrations in honor of their deities, below their feet a force capable of changing the world was being born. Neither sword nor fire could crush Christianity. The more severe the persecution, the more people turned to this new faith, seeing in it salvation from cruelty and injustice. The empire was cracking at the seams, its borders weakened under the barbarian onslaught, and within it was torn apart by corruption and intrigue. Christianity became more than just a religion. It became a symbol of hope and resistance. Then came Constantine. In 312, before the decisive battle of the Milvian Bridge, he saw a sign in the heavens, a shining cross with the inscription, "In this sign, conquer." Commanding his soldiers to paint this symbol on their shields, he led them into battle and won. This moment changed the course of history. Constantine embraced Christianity and granted it freedom in the empire by issuing the Edict of Milan in 313. Rome, which had once persecuted Christians, now acknowledged their faith. But the acceptance of Christianity did not bring peace. On the contrary, the empire plunged into a new spiritual conflict. The old gods were overthrown, their temples destroyed or rededicated. Priests, once respected and powerful, lost their influence. The new faith, now official, faced internal disagreements. Questions about the nature of Christ tore the church apart. Councils convened again and again, yet unity remained elusive. The empire, already torn by internal strife, now suffered from spiritual schisms. Emperors tried to use Christianity to strengthen their power, but encountered new problems. In 381, Emperor Theodosius the Great made Christianity the empire's sole official religion, banning pagan cults. This decision only deepened the divide. Those who honored the ancient gods were now outcasts in their own land. Centuries-old traditions were rejected, and the empire sank deeper into conflict. Within the church itself, disputes flared. Arians and Orthodox believers, Donatists and Novatians, all fought for the truth, but this struggle only weakened imperial power. Emperors, wanting to maintain unity, intervened in church affairs, often worsening the situation. Christianity, intended to save Rome, failed to unify it. Barbarians at the borders knew neither Christ nor the ancient gods. They didn't care what symbols adorned Roman temples. When they stormed cities, they destroyed everything in their path. Rome, once united, was now divided. The old gods were gone, but along with them went what had once bound imperial culture. The new faith brought new hopes, but also new conflicts. Crosses rose over the ruins of grandeur, but they could not hide the cracks tearing the empire apart from within. The time of change had come, but Rome could not adapt. Christianity became a new force, but the empire, weakened by internal strife and external threats, continued its descent toward decline. And though the faith triumphed, Rome could no longer be saved. Its fate was sealed, and nothing could halt the approaching darkness. Chapter 3. The Abolition of Slavery. The Roman Empire, great and powerful, stood on the shoulders of millions of slaves. Their labor was the invisible force that turned the wheels of the empire, fed its cities, and sustained its legions. But when the chains of slavery began to break, Rome felt the tremor beneath its foundations. Freedom came suddenly, like a storm on a cloudless day. Christian ideas of equality took root in people's hearts, and the age-old chains began to loosen. Emperors, under pressure from this new faith and in the name of mercy, started to free the slaves. But they did not foresee that the liberation of some would lead to ruin for all. The fields emptied. The vast latifundia, once golden with wheat, now lay overgrown with weeds. Workshops stood still. The forges cooled, the looms fell silent, and the markets became deserted. The great roads of Rome no longer heard the clatter of carts carrying goods, and caravans became ghosts of the past. Freedom arrived, but with it came hopelessness. Former slaves wandered aimlessly, unsure where to go. They had no land, no home, no place in a society that for centuries had seen them as property. Their dreams of a new life shattered against harsh reality. They were free, but from what? And for what? Landowners watched as their world crumbled. They looked upon empty fields, abandoned homes, and dwindling wealth. Their grandeur slipped away like sand through fingers. Accustomed to power and luxury, they could not accept the new order. Their anger and despair grew, but nothing could be changed. The empire tried to cling to the edge of the abyss. New laws, new orders, attempts to bind peasants to the land, all only heightened the chaos. The people grumbled, and uprisings flared like fires in a dry forest. The social fabric of Rome tore apart, and no one could mend it. Legions, once invincible, now suffered from a lack of men and resources. Soldiers starved, weapons wore out, discipline waned. Without slaves, there was no grain, no metal, no clothing. The great army of Rome became a shadow of itself, and enemies sensed this weakness. Rome sank into silence and decay. Its economy, built on slave labor, collapsed, and with it, the heart of the empire fell. The city that never slept now slumbered in anticipation of its inevitable end. In that silence, only the whispers of former slaves and the groans of ruined masters remained. Freedom had brought chaos, and grandeur had turned to dust. Rome, like a giant on clay feet, collapsed under the weight of its own mistakes. But the worst was yet to come. Without a strong economy, without a powerful army, without unity among its people, Rome was defenseless against external threats. The barbarians were already at the gates, and the empire could not fend them off. The abolition of slavery was a fateful decision. What was meant to be a step toward justice led to ruin. The great Rome fell not by an enemy's sword, but by its own choices. And on its ruins remained only memories of past grandeur and the bitter realization of lost opportunities. Chapter 4. Political Intrigues. At the heart of the Roman Empire, where the sun of grandeur once shone brightly, shadows of betrayal began to thicken. In the luxurious halls of palaces, the whispers of conspirators grew louder than the fanfares of victors. In the dark corridors of power, intrigues were woven, and every step could be the last. Rome, which had once controlled the fate of the world, could no longer even control itself. Emperors rose and fell faster than dawn, replaced dusk over the Roman horizon. Each new ruler promised to restore former glory, but instead plunged the empire into deeper chaos. The crown became not a symbol of strength, but a curse poisoning the souls of those who sought it. Civil wars tore the empire apart, and the people's faith in Rome's might melted like wax under the hot sun. The darkest years came during the reign of Commodus. The son of the great Marcus Aurelius, He turned the imperial court into the arena of his mad pleasures. His cruelty and greed plunged the capital into a pit of fear and blood. The time when wise emperors protected the empire's borders had passed. Now the capital drowned in intrigue, conspiracies, and betrayal. Commodus, whose reign ended with the daggers of conspirators, opened the gates to even darker times. With each emperor's fall, power passed into the hands of the legions. The commanders, who once loyally served the empire, now became its destroyers. The legions, which once fought for Rome's glory, now used their swords for their own ambitions. Provincial governors and generals rose against each other, each dreaming of calling himself the new Caesar. Rome's political map turned into a chessboard, where every piece played by its own rules and every move brought new destruction. Behind the scenes of power hid those who pulled the strings of the empire's fate. Courtiers, eunuchs, priests, their whispers determined more than the emperor's orders. They manipulated rulers, bribed commanders, and wove webs of intrigue. Imperial authority no longer controlled its destiny. It was controlled by those who remained in the shadows. Every alliance was temporary. Every friend could become an enemy. And in this labyrinth of betrayal, no one was safe. The legions, once standing shoulder to shoulder, were now divided. Their loyalty was sold for gold, and they were ready to abandon their emperor if the price was high enough. The honor of the Roman soldier, once sacred, was lost in the struggle for power. On battlefields, brothers raised swords against each other, and Roman blood was shed by Roman hands. The empire was tearing down its own walls, its traditions, its soul. Against this chaos, Rome's authority was cracking at the seams. The era of great emperors had passed, and with it, the era of unity. Now, everyone wanted to rule, but no one could prevent the empire from collapsing. Legionaries, senators, courtiers, and commanders destroyed what their ancestors had built over centuries. The Roman Empire was becoming a shadow of itself, where behind every corner hid a new conspirator, and behind every throne, a new traitor. The fatal blow came in 284, when Emperor Diocletian attempted to save the empire by dividing it. He created the Tetrarchy, believing that dividing power among 4 emperors would strengthen Rome. But this decision did not unify the empire. It only deepened the split. Each ruler strove for absolute power, and instead of unity, the empire plunged into even deeper chaos. Borders blurred, and Rome's enemies saw this as an opportunity to strike. Rome, once a beacon of civilization, now drowned in its own darkness. Power, once a symbol of strength and stability, had become a poison destroying all who touched it. Intrigues and betrayals devoured the empire like a black abyss from which there was no return. The great city, which had stood unwavering for centuries, now trembled under the weight of its own sins. Shadows gathered over Rome, and with each passing day, the light of hope faded. The great empire, which once shone like the sun, was slowly sinking into a sea of chaos and destruction. And when the last rays of light disappeared beyond the horizon, it became clear. Chapter 5. Barbarians at the Gates. Clouds gathered over the Roman Empire, and the shadow of the approaching storm became a grim reality. Barbarians, the Goths, Vandals, Huns, like an unstoppable force of nature, drew near its borders, bringing with them destruction and chaos. Their footsteps thundered like distant lightning, foretelling inevitable catastrophe. The Roman legions, once unbreakable, now felt the cold grip of fear in the depths of their hearts. In the north, the Goths, like a relentless wave, crashed against the empire's weakened borders. Oppressed and desperate, they crossed the Danube, hoping to find refuge and salvation. But instead of hospitality, Rome met them with betrayal and cruelty. The fire of revenge ignited in their hearts. In 378, on the fields of Adrianople, 2 armies clashed in a deadly battle. The sound of Gothic horns drowned out the pulse of the legionnaires, and even the bravest warriors felt the icy touch of fate. When the sun set, the Roman army lay in ruins, and Emperor Valens fell in the flames of battle. The myth of Rome's invincibility was shattered, and the barbarians realized that the empire was no longer untouchable. This victory was a signal for others. Barbarian tribes, united by a common goal and a thirst for freedom, moved toward the heart of the empire. The borders, once guarded by disciplined legions, were now open. Rome, mired in intrigue and strife, could not muster the strength to resist. Internal chaos turned the barbarians not just into enemies, but into an inevitable reckoning for the empire's sins. In 410, darkness finally enveloped the Eternal City. Alaric, king of the Goths, stood at Rome's gates. Like dark clouds, his warriors surrounded the walls, and hopes of salvation faded like smoke. On that fateful night, the city, which for centuries had known no enemies at its gates, opened its doors. Barbarians poured in, and the pillaging that ensued shook the entire world. The cries of mothers mingled with the crackling of fires, consuming homes. Shouts of despair echoed through deserted streets, reflecting off broken hearts. Palaces and temples, shining with gold and marble, now blazed in flames. The treasures gathered over centuries vanished in a torrent of greed. But the most terrifying loss was not the wealth, it was the soul of Rome itself. As the last sparks of life faded, the world realized that the era of titans had come to an end. Yet fate did not spare Rome. 45 years later, a new storm struck. The Vandals, coming from the south under the ruthless leadership of Gaiseric, once again besieged the Eternal City. They were like a hurricane sweeping everything in their path. The pillaging lasted 2 excruciating weeks. The cries of mothers once again mixed with the crashing of columns, and blood flowed along the ancient cobblestones. No sanctuaries or treasures were left. Everything was taken or destroyed. Rome, once majestic and indomitable, now lay in ruins, its heart broken. This was not just the destruction of a city, it was the symbolic end of a great civilization. The barbarians had not only taken the treasures, but the very soul of Rome. The city, which for centuries had symbolized power and eternity, had become a reminder that nothing under the sun is truly everlasting. The legions no longer marched along the empire's roads. They were replaced by barbarian hordes, and foreign banners waved over the ruins of magnificent temples. Roman authority faded like a mirage, and with it vanished the hope of reviving former glory. With each new blow, each lost battle, each looted palace, the shadow over the empire grew denser, plunging the world into a new era, an era without Rome. The pillaging of 410 and 455 were not just historical events, they were blows from which the empire could never recover. The flames that consumed Rome symbolized the fading of a civilization that had illuminated the world for centuries. When the last fires died out, a silence settled over the ruins of the Eternal City, broken only by the whisper of the wind, murmuring with the shadows of the past. But even in this dark hour, the story did not end. The ashes of Rome became the soil from which a new world would grow. And though the barbarians took treasures and destroyed walls, they could not erase the ideas and legacy Rome had left to humanity. The storm had passed, but its memory would live on for ages, reminding us of the great city whose fall marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Chapter 6. Romulus, Augustulus, and Odoacer. 476. The year history closed its circle, and legend turned to ashes. On the throne where Caesar, Augustus, and Constantine once sat, now sat a boy, Romulus Augustulus. His name was an ironic reflection of the past. Romulus, in honor of Rome's legendary founder, and Augustus, in honor of its first emperor. But instead of the grandeur of his ancestors, he bore the burden of the empire's final days. The Roman Empire, majestic and invincible, was now but a shadow of itself. The legions had disbanded, the borders had crumbled, the city had emptied. Grandeur gave way to oblivion. The barbarians no longer knocked at the gates, they were already ruling within. And among them loomed the figure of Odoacer, leader of the Germanic warriors, bearing Rome's fate on his shoulders. Odoacer saw the empire's weakness. He knew that Rome had not fallen to the swords of his people, but had decayed from within. His troops marched along the roads that once trembled under the footsteps of the legions. Now, these roads led directly to the heart of the Eternal City. When Odoacer approached Rome, there was no battle, no resistance. The city, once gleaming with the light of civilization, had fallen silent. Young Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor, faced a choice he could not avoid. He was not a warrior, not a ruler, merely a symbol of a bygone era. In the shadows of empty palaces, Odoacer met with Romulus. Without anger, without cruelty, but with unyielding resolve, he demanded abdication. Romulus, understanding the inevitability of fate, laid the imperial regalia at the conqueror's feet. With this gesture, the 1,000-year history of the empire came to an end. With the empire's final breath, the shadows of great ancestors disappeared, leaving Rome in the embrace of oblivion. But Odoacer did not declare himself emperor. He sent the symbols of power to Constantinople, acknowledging the empire's unity only in the east. The Western Roman Empire ceased to exist, not with the thunder of battles or the cries of victory, but with a quiet whisper of abdication. The great era came to an end. Rome, which for centuries had been the heart of the world, stopped its beating. Its forums fell silent. Its temples sank into shadow. Its roads were overgrown with the grass of forgetfulness. The dream of eternity shattered upon the rocks of reality. The barbarians did not merely take power, they claimed Rome's very soul. But the end of the empire was not the end of its legacy. Like a phoenix from the ashes, its ideas and achievements continued to live in a new world. History moved forward, but now without Rome at its center. The great empire was gone, leaving behind an eternal legacy that would shine through the ages. Chapter 7. The Legacy of Rome. The ashes of Rome have cooled, its marble palaces have crumbled, and the roads once trodden by legions are now overgrown with the grass of forgetfulness. But can an idea that became the heart of civilization truly be destroyed? Although the stones of Rome fell, its spirit rose, weaving itself into the fabric of time, shaping the destinies of nations and empires. Roman wisdom, forged in the fire of centuries, became the foundation for future legal systems. The laws created by the greatest jurists of the empire survived the ages, becoming an unbreakable cornerstone for new nations. The justice that the Romans pursued continued to shine, an eternal beacon for those seeking truth. The idea of a republic, born within the Senate's walls, did not perish with the fall of the empire. It was reborn, inspiring generations to strive for freedom and equality. Like a seed that fell on fertile soil, it sprouted in the hearts of those who believed in the power of the people. Rome's concept of civic responsibility became a cornerstone for many future states. Roman art and architecture lived on, reflected in the grand cathedrals and palaces built around the world. Columns, arches, spires, the symbols of Roman greatness, were repeated over and over, like echoes of the past. Even barbarian kings, who took power over Roman lands, sought to immortalize their rule through the lens of Roman aesthetics. The Christian Church, which took upon itself the role of guardian of Rome's spiritual legacy, spread its ideals to all corners of Europe. Popes, seated on the throne of St. Peter, became the new custodians of Roman tradition. Faith and law, united under the arches of churches, carried the light of knowledge through the dark ages. The philosophers and scholars of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance drew inspiration from the works of Roman thinkers. Cicero, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius. Their voices echoed through the ages, guiding and shaping the minds of the future. Roman thought became the foundation for the development of science, literature, and culture. As Cicero once said, "History is the witness of time, the light of truth, the life of memory." The history of Rome continued to shine through the ages, reminding humanity of greatness and decline, of strength and wisdom. Rome had vanished, but its heart beat in every law, in every column, in every idea of freedom. The ideals of Rome outlived its fall, becoming an inseparable part of the world's heritage. Its spirit continued to inspire great deeds, urging humanity to seek justice and excellence. As long as these ideals live on, Rome will remain eternal. In today's world, we see traces of Rome everywhere, in legal systems that protect human rights, in architecture that awes with its grandeur, in political institutions striving to serve the people. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but its legacy became an immortal flame that continues to burn in the hearts of people. Rome died, but its spirit remains eternal. And as long as there are those who strive for greatness, justice, and wisdom, Rome will live on. Its story is our story. Its legacy is our legacy. In this sense, Rome truly is eternal. And so, Rome fell, but did not vanish. Its grandeur does not fade, but continues to shine through the darkness of time. It became a legend, a myth, an ideal. And perhaps the greatest legacy of Rome is a reminder that even the mightiest empires can fall, but ideas and values live on forever.